Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar with Mr. Saketh. The webinar, this webinar is brought to you by Executive Education, Dayanand Sagar University, under the aegis of the Distinguished Speaker Series. Saketh, you're a distinguished speaker, so welcome to this webinar. Saketh is a co-founder of Perpule, one of the fastest growing retail tech companies in India, and has raised investments from notable investors like Kalaari Capital, Prime Ventures, and Venture Highway. Perpule helps make offline stores smarter by creating a data-first platform that improves consumer experience across all channels, which include point of sale and self-checkout. Perpule has previously launched India's first cashier-less, cash-till-less store along with HyperCITY last year. It has notable clients like BigBazaar, Shoppers Stop, SPAR, etc. to its name. Saketh graduated from IIT Madras in 2015 and previously worked at Goldman Sachs, and he currently manages the product and engineering team of Perpule. He was also previously recognized in the Forbes 30 under 30 Asia 2018 list, a huge achievement, I must say, for a person who's as young as Saketh. We will be talking to Saketh on how the startup community is coping during the COVID-19 pandemic. My co-hosts for the evening are Professor Jitendra Patri and Professor Rahul Dige. I will now hand over to Professor Dige to spell out the rules for the webinar, and then he will hand it over to Professor Patri. Rahul, good evening.
Thank you, Captain. Welcome, Saketh. Welcome everyone else to this, I'm sure, what is going to be a very insightful talk. In these times, I'm sure all of us are wondering how startups are contributing, and also how they are reconfiguring their businesses for the current needs of the hour. So I think that would be sort of the focus of the talk, I assume. I'm very happy to co-host this along with distinguished faculty from Dayanand Sagar. For the duration of the talk, everyone will be on mute. Maybe at the end, if we have time, we will unmute and take some questions in real time. But otherwise, please do post your questions on the chat. Please refrain from posting anything else on the chat, Zoom group chat. I will collate the questions and pass those on to Saketh, or maybe if you have the time, maybe we'll ask him the questions in real time. So with that, Saketh, over to you.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Captain, for the warm welcome. My pleasure to be part of this webinar. Also, if that's all right, I was hoping we can have questions in real time, if that's fine.
Yeah, we could do that. I think in that case, I will request everyone very strongly to unmute themselves only when they are speaking, when they have a question, and then immediately go on mute. So before asking a question, please raise your hand and we will try to unmute you. Since there are a large number of participants in this call, we don't know if that mechanism will work very well, Saketh, but we will give it a try, surely.
Yeah. Cool. So let me just try and present my screen. Can you please check if you're able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see it. So
very clearly, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Right. So I put together a few slides, a small deck about how we as startups have actually reacted to the corona incident until now. So the good part is, I think startups almost reflect how an individual also or the founders usually think and actually move. So a good chunk of how my company has responded is the way me, Abhinav, and Yogesh, my other two co-founders too, have responded. And while anyone can imagine that a black swan event as something like Corona can actually cause a lot of panic, that's literally how it started. Until it actually, I think no one realized it was a very big deal until it hit our stock markets. That was the first time that someone actually figured out that this is not normal. There's something huge that's actually gonna change the economy and how we look at things. And that's literally the first time most of the startup community also felt the heat about it. A good amount of time before that, some of our VCs actually started telling us that this could be something big, do look out. But things started like hitting the roof only when actually the stock market started falling and people could actually see that, okay, fine, something really big is happening, right? So as expected, the first thing that most startups and the community itself was, it went into a panic mode, right? The norm became slowing down everything and trying to see if normalcy can return, because a good number of our clients, our sales, all of this was going down, and we were not really sure what to do. So we started going into survival mode. That's literally the first thing that most people would do in an occasion like this, right? But after like, I think a week of lockdown, so lockdown, one advantage that all of us have is that we get a lot of time to think, right? So I think the first 1 week of the lockdown gave us ample amount of time to actually see, okay, that this is immense potential for opportunities and new businesses building. So that is when the startup community started doing two things. One is trying to see how they can actually evolve their business to take advantage of the event and try and see what best can be done. And the second was the startup community itself started helping out in like more ways than one to help out India. A good number of those things I've covered in the following slides. But a black swan event is something like, you can say a smaller scale one was demonetization. How demonetization was like the birth of PhonePe and Google Pay and almost like catapulted Paytm to wherever it is. So idea is, and this is not just from demonetization itself. If you look at the past, even the attacks on the US World Trade Center, etc., they caused a lot of behavior changes. That also was like a black swan event. And that really triggers a lot of things to deviate from the normal. And this is where opportunity lies, is one insight that we got from the past. And hopefully all of us are trying to see what best we can do of this. Right? So obviously Corona is much more bigger than a demonetization. It's a global event, and the impact of this is like obviously much larger. The number of things that are going to change post this, we feel is going to be dramatic, and a good amount of our effort and insights and our data analysis going towards that to understand what behavior changes this might drive and how it might affect or impact our business, right? So whenever me or anyone else, to be frank, is looking at some potential at a time like this, right? Or even in general, the basic trend we are trying to look at is there a non-linear change around us? Ideally in something that is adjacent to your business, because which is in your business, you're very easily able to find it, but something that is adjacent to your business, right? So it could be anything. Let's say if it is e-commerce, then it would mean the logistics companies will be thriving a lot too, because to drive e-commerce companies, you need logistics to actually be really good in place. Logistics companies might actually need some software, and those software providers might actually get much more revenue. So usually finding nonlinear changes in adjacent businesses or any part that is adjacent to your business is where a lot of potential lies to grow. So how we can use those nonlinear changes and those adjacent markets to dramatically increase your market size or increase your rate of adoption is primarily where me and a good number of our startup folks have been looking at. A few examples of that I'll probably share a bit in the later part of the webinar. How like I said, I'm thinking is, yes, it has impacted our business quite a lot. I've already seen almost like a 20 to 30% decline in revenue, because a good number of our clients are actually renegotiating deals with us. It's not an easy time at all, right? Everyone's thinking about cutting down costs, trying to see if we can consolidate. But this is frankly the time to see if you can actually step out of your comfort zone and think hard to see where exactly to double down. Right? Ideally, if you have something to double down on, that's your best bet for this time. You never know how long this would last. FX, I'm sure, will last at least for like 6 months to 1 year. And every single company startup over there is trying to do this. If you don't do it, they would do it. That's for sure. So the last 2 weeks to 3 weeks have been like a real, time for us to reinvent ourselves and see how we can evolve. How we as Perpule have done it, I've put in the later part of the slides. I will surely come to that. But this is currently the way I'm thinking, and I'm sure a good number of the startup founders are thinking too. That said, while startups are trying to figure out their own businesses, a large number of startups have done a good number of initiatives to help the country. I just put down a few initiatives over here that some of my friends themselves are driving for India. So telemedicine, both MFine and DocsApp are currently providing a free teleconsultation for any COVID-related symptoms. That's something that they brought about in less than a week. So one good thing that startup founders actually did was they created something called Startups Against COVID, a Telegram group where most of India's top startup founders are participants over there. This was initiated within 1 week. And most of these guys are actually trying to work out, giving resources to see how we can actually help out communities. And this has become a very, very solid group that is helping India and the governments to tackle this, to tackle Corona. So telemedicine is one thing that we very easily started off, and they're doing now for free of cost for a lot of users. They've actually set up both telephonic call centers as well as video-based telemedicine centers that can actually be done. Another is essentials delivery. If you just read the news, you can see that almost 15 startups who've been doing something very different until now, but who can leverage their current infrastructure to actually deliver essentials. All of them are actually doing that. Includes Perpule also, because everyone who is in the logistics and retail space are trying to see how best they can actually help out the country in this time. From the likes of Perpule, Box8, Swiggy, Flipkart, Amazon, I think every single at Rapido, there are loads of startups who are actually doing this. I know another startup from our portfolio who's helping with insurance for workers, right? That's again something that's very important, and GG Benefits is the name. Sorry about that. So that's another thing that one of the startups is working on. There's an IIT Kanpur startup that actually reinvented its manufacturing to try and start making masks and sanitizers. They're working with the Mahindra Group to actually build that in large scale. So that's another beautiful thing that's happening. There are a few contact tracing apps that people have built. MFine has also built a data tracking app for any user who has Corona. They actually get that app installed on patients who have Corona, and that really helps us with contact tracing to understand where all they have gone. And the e-pass, I don't know how many of you have seen it in Bangalore, but MyGate is the company that actually built it for the Karnataka government. Idea is, how can we make giving a pass to someone who is on the roads much more easier, and to ensure that there's a digital process and of approval and etc. across all of this. That's another initiative that MyGate built. And why I believe some of these are really important. For example, delivery, right? Why we personally believe that having contactless delivery is much better than people going to the streets is because every single logistics worker over there is fully GPS tracked. For whatever every startup is ensuring like really good wellness and care for them, they're ensuring they have masks and everything. They have full GPS tracking. So if at all, for whatever reason, even some delivery worker gets Corona, you have very good contact tracing that will ensure that every single person can actually be traced and quarantined. So that's primarily the biggest reason why most of these things have been pushed by us to the government. Even the COVID group, Entrepreneurs Against COVID, we have a good number of government representatives in the group whom we are trying to push this. And before Karnataka CM actually extended the lockdown and gave all his restraints, a good number of people from the Telegram group were actually in touch with them and their office to actually give our own recommendations. So as much as possible, we've been trying to help out the government with their decisions, and also with any infrastructure that we can build during this time. Right. So another person involved with all this is, of course, the VCs who funded us, right? One good thing that they've been able to tell us is history, yes, it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? They've seen situations like this, especially the World Trade Center incident that happened, and they could actually see how people respond, what is the ideal way to respond, and how to actually conserve and stay through this time to actually make it big out there. So a good number of our VCs have actually given us some playbooks to try and see what all we should do to consolidate and double down. So that has helped us quite a lot. Obviously, the first thing that we do is computing the runway to try and see how much time we can actually manage. Everyone now wants a minimum of a 2-year runway, and that is assuming like a 30% revenue cut. So that automatically means in a lot of cases that it would cause cost reductions and people being let go, and in some cases their salaries being cut, right? But most of the time we are trying to make it variable so that at least based on the company's performance, they are rewarded when it does well. Another thing that we are very, very closely doing is getting a 360-degree view. It's even more important now to make sure that we are in touch with our customers, clients, our board, our investors, and also any employees of ours, because not just us, I'm sure everyone is started over there. All of our large clients, India and external, have actually almost like cordoned off and closed. Everyone's trying to figure out their own business. So they have no idea. We have no idea how it's actually going to affect our revenues in the future. A good number of them are already scared and have gone into panic mode to try and reduce their costs. So one of our Indonesian clients, for example, a signed contract that was already there, they actually withdrew and they said, we can't actually abide by this. We might have to come back to 6 months later, right? So a good number of changes are happening, and it is up to us to make sure that we have a good and clear understanding of what is happening in the market before we can actually react. So that's one of the things that we've been up to in the last 1 to 2 weeks. And again, there are three.
Hi, Saketh, Jiten here.
Hi,
if I may, kind of ask you a quick question as you go through your talk. I know, thanks so much for joining us and giving us a perspective of what kind of work you're doing, especially the way you're helping the government. I think very interesting and superb stuff. I mean, hats off. But what are the key changes today in Perpule strategy from the pre-COVID-19 days? What are you guys, doing?
So I have it towards the later part of this. Shall I take it? You want to do it now?
No, your flow. I'll just leave it to you to go with your flow, and then I'll have a couple of other questions which I'll come through. So
then I can do it post like I cover the BC part. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to take it right now.
Yeah, there are a couple of other questions, but I think we'll come to that. Then I think I'll ask those questions also then.
Sure, sounds good. Perfect. So yeah, the VCs. Sorry, I think I was telling about the 3 stages of startups that we currently have and how each of us are trying to look at it, right? So again, because of a black swan event like this, a lot of opportunity is gonna arise. You might have, if you're in an idea prototyping stage or a launch stage or at a product market fit stage where you're still trying to figure out the product market fit, this is a good opportunity to try and pivot, ideally to something adjacent to your business that is probably growing. But even otherwise, since you're still in early stages, this is still a good time to actually try and see if you can build something new that will kick off over the next 1 to 2 years. There is surely massive potential over there. If you are in a scale and expansion stage, this is where you're stuck, right? Unless you're someone like Zoom, it's very difficult, or BigBazaar, it's very difficult for people to grow over here. You can take a few wild bets to see if some new path can open. This is probably the best time, because if you see all the previous businesses almost like stuck, it's not growing much at all, 0% usage. So this is probably the best time to make a few wild bets. I think a good number of people in the startup ecosystem are doing it. No one's, I think, done delivery. Among the 15 startups that started delivery, I think only like 25% have done delivery at all in the past, right? For once, at least during the COVID time, unit economics was working out. So a lot of people are trying it. How it is actually going to evolve in the future, we don't know. But there are a lot more things like this that people are trying, and this is probably the time to do it. But again, you can't, if you are in a scale expansion stage, you can't really afford to completely rechange the way you're looking at things and build something new. So survival and growth of the business as much as possible would still be your key priorities. But if you have an adjacency that will grow, you double down on it, right? So that is very important. We had an adjacency that is going to grow. So we've actually doubled down on it, maybe tripled down. I'll walk you through that just post this. Yeah, the other things that every VC is telling us, just, because this is how they have seen history repeat, and they believe that this is what is going to happen in the future too. So new funding will freeze for the next 6 months minimum. So any new startup that's trying to raise funding in a space that is not adjacent to Corona and something that is going to grow just post this, it's going to become very, very difficult to raise funding. Economy will obviously take a hit. It will recover, of course, but at least it'll be felt the next 6 months. 30 to 50% revenue drops. Everyone is trying to figure out their runway, assuming a 30 to 50% revenue drop, which is very, very highly plausible, right? All of us are already renegotiating our contracts with vendors and clients, because a lot of them have clauses that can allow the vendor to stop the contract, and that's going to cause us a big problem. So we've already started working on that. And almost every startup I know has a hiring freeze. So everyone's picking up cost saving initiatives, reducing marketing capital, capex, and we've in fact even renegotiated our rent with our landlord, right? So everyone's going to that level to actually see how best you can actually improve costs and extend the runway. Yes, so while I said the economy will take a hit, if you see every time something like coronavirus hit us, not this big, but still Ebola, swine flu, SARS, every single time stock markets and the economy took like a very big toll. But if you actually look at graphs of the past, if the economy took a toll of 20%, it bounced back by 30% in less than a year, right? So it is something that's going to improve, and that is something for sure that we can expect. But during this time, survival is key, right? There will be massive number of behavioral change, because people have been forced out of the norm, and that I think will be a very, very big opportunity for a lot of companies, startups, and individuals. And yeah, ideally, all of us, a good number of startups who are in scale mode are primarily trying to see how best they can actually really, really build their product well, so that they can come out of it with a product that's better than competition. That is one way to go about it, right? For individuals, it's like working on skill sets that will be really sought after post this, or working in companies that will beat the recession. So the way startups are thinking, I think every single individual out here should also be thinking in a similar fashion, because this is a fairly large effect that is going to hit everyone, companies and individuals together. Yeah, so I thought I'd tell a bit about how Perpule is also working during this time. We actually did two things. This was a bit before COVID, and this actually was the infrastructure that helped us build grocery delivery. So I don't know if you've used mini apps on PhonePe, Paytm, and Google Pay. So this is like how WeChat has mini apps in China. The idea is by creating a mini app for any store, let's say it is a nearby grocery wala or the nearby pharma company that's actually selling you drugs, right? So any of these two can actually build a small mini app that can immediately come upon Google Pay, PhonePe, and Paytm. And the idea is, by doing this, you will suddenly get distribution and eyeballs of almost like 20-30 million users on a daily basis. So that is primarily the idea we're working with. This is something that is very big in China. It hasn't yet taken off in India. A good number of super apps are coming up, which are actually doing things like this. We partner with a lot of them. And the idea is, if you partner with Perpule, we can immediately get your mini apps on top of all of these platforms, so that users nearby you can actually order from these mini apps. So almost like 60-70% of the mini apps that are there on these platforms are powered by Perpule right now. So this is something that we had done just like a month before, Corona hit India, right? So we hadn't till then touched e-commerce much. There's primarily e-commerce, just that we're giving like crazy distribution to all these smaller players who don't have the marketing budgets or the spends or the tech infrastructure to get this done, right? So this opened up a lot of channels of thinking for us. And the idea now is using this infrastructure, we started something called StoreSay. So what StoreSay is basically is we started grocery delivery on top of all the retail clients you're working on. So every retail client right now that we work with, we have a product called point of sale. The point of sale is basically where within the store you have the desktop or a mobile point of sale that the staff uses to bill you when you go to the store. So that's the point of sale. The advantage of having the point of sale is that of us having the point of sale is that we have a real-time integration with the internal systems of the retailers. So if you look at any large retailer in India, that includes BigBazaar, SPAR, More, Spencer's, Vishal Megamart, Metro, any of these guys. All of these guys have a real-time integration with us. When I say real-time integration, I mean, I know what inventory they have at any point. I know what their catalog is. I have all images. Like I have like a real-time view of what their store looks like and what the inventory is. That is like very, very valuable to us. So this infrastructure is what basically allowed us to build a consumer-facing app called Stores. Idea is now we've partnered with these stores like More, Metro, Vishal Megamart, SPAR, etc. We've started doing some sort of bulk buying where you onboard your apartment in Bangalore, and we link your apartment to the nearest big market store that is available. And since we already have a real-time integration with them, and also that ensures delivery is always available, so we already had the basic infra to set this up. And we put a small limit that says something like up to, once you have like 25 orders by next day, your orders get delivered. But another advantage that played in our favor that we didn't realize was there is no traffic on the roads, right? So one driver is actually able to do almost like 20 to 25 deliveries for us. This is something that is unheard of, right? And unit economics in delivery market was never good ideally because there's too much traffic. One driver can maximum do like 4 or 5 deliveries in a day. Unit economics would never work. No one is willing to pay a shipping fee either. But all of that actually right now has fully changed. You can pay like a 75 to 100 bucks per delivery. There's no traffic, so optimizations in delivery and roads is like very, very easy. You can actually club a lot of orders and start and take them up in one trip. That again is very difficult to do on a regular day. So all these things actually allowed us to bring in for the first time operationally profitable grocery delivery in Bangalore, right? How this is going to evolve post the lockdown is something obviously that we need to figure out. A few ideas that we have is something like group buy, etc., which we've already started, but something in a much better manner, where ideally we optimize on delivery and logistics costs by doing some sort of group buy. But again, that we are not very sure if it is for the tier 1 market or the tier 2 market. So there are a lot of things that we need to figure out personally too. But just using this as our way to reach the market and actually help out the people. So we've also partnered with Tejasvi Surya, who's the MP in Bangalore South. So we are doing free delivery for all users who are ordering via Tejasvi Surya's. They have an initiative for a call center. You can just call them. You tell them what all items you want or what medicines you want, and either Store Se or Dunzo fulfills them. Dunzo is the other startup that's helping them with fulfillment, right? So we are actually partnering with them too. So the idea is, at least using this, we can help out the community, number one. And two, this gives us a good insight into how to bring about operationally profitable grocery delivery. That is something that no one has until now, including BigBasket. And our advantage against BigBasket types is we're asset light, right? BigBasket is a very asset heavy model. That's the biggest difference between us and them. They can't really scale up that fast. They can't enable your nearby grocery store to actually deliver to you, but we can actually do that. And that, I believe, is like a big differentiator now that is helping us scale very fast, but not BigBasket. Of course, BigBasket is also doing, I think, around 2 lakh deliveries a day. We are doing right now almost like 10,000, and that is in no time. And this is just in like a couple of cities. And the second we go pan-India, we have like a lot of push from other governments to actually help this, bring it out over there. We're starting it in Lucknow also now, and a few other cities that we're trying. So hopefully the idea is we pivot this into something like a group buy model in the future that will still make it profitable for us. Not fully cleared out, but at least try and get 1 million users to try and see if we can give a very good customer experience for them. And that base would be something that we can use to build some other revenue models in the future. A good amount of it, like I said, is still something that we are figuring out and doing it. But as of now, we believe there's a very, very beautiful way to try and see if we can make grocery delivery mainstream in India. One of the bets, obviously, that we are making is the behavioral change that shipping charges might actually be fine with for people, and bulk buy is another thing that we are trying to see if it works out. These 2 bets, ideally, hopefully they work out, and that should help us grow even faster in the future. A few other opportunities, obviously, I think a good number of these things you already would know about. All of these industries are growing. These are the only industries that are growing at a time like this. Remote working and auxiliary services, something that helps with efficiency, etc. Like the works of, like the Zoom world, etc. are obviously improving. Hygiene and wellness. Every single person, like I know a startup that's actually building something that will help with washing of vegetables. No one's ever washed vegetables in their life before this. And that startup believes that everyone is now going to get used to it because they understand what all problems can come from not washing vegetables. They actually have a box where you just put your veggies in it. It'll make sure it's soap washed and you can take it out and you can use them, right? So something like that. So there are a lot of things. And another is doors and how do you make contactless doors to open? So in the sense, you just use your shoe to actually open the door instead of having to touch the door handle, right? It can even be used for washrooms. So there's another product that another company is working on that I heard of, right? E-commerce that I've already explained to you why e-commerce is a big deal and how it should help with the contactless delivery because it's fully tracked and fully optimized. So hopefully that is something that's going to grow and is already growing. Online education and remote learning, this is the time for a lot of people to pick up skills that they don't have previously. So I think that market is growing like brilliantly. Gaming and entertainment, I think everyone's looking for new games and entertainment throughout. So I have another friend startup which is actually building a game which is around betting of money to actually on quizzes and learning. I think it's not there in India because it's not legal, but a good number of other countries that it's like skyrocketing. Group buying, etc., is another thing that we are personally think might improve. So that is another area. But another big opportunity that no one's yet tapped or is looking at is, I think, the China opportunity. This is my personal belief. I already read some news article about Japan putting in almost like $1 trillion to try and see if they can remove China from other country and have like a backup. So I think a good amount of analysis can actually go into what China is building and exporting right now. It's the world's biggest exporter, right? So there's massive potential to see what China is building. A large number of countries are going to start looking at backups for China. Even if not the full business, a good part of their business. Hopefully India is going to benefit from that and pick up some of it. I personally am myself trying to do a lot of research to try and understand where there might be a lot of opportunity there. And hopefully India picks up on it and actually builds a few things that can help other countries out. I also feel a lot of countries have not yet gone against China with respect to this, primarily because they have the biggest supply chain with respect to medical supplies. So once the corona thing is fully over, my personal bet is that a good number of countries will want to move away from China, and that should be like incredible potential for India too. And that is another very, very interesting opportunity that one should analyze and look at. Yeah. At a high level, this is primarily the content I have. We will have to consolidate and survive during this time. If you are lucky enough to find an adjacent business which you believe can actually grow, you will have to double down on it, and let's try and see what best you can make out of it. This is, like I said, same for startups or individuals. I think both will have to have a similar approach toward. Hopefully, all of us can actually. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover. I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Saketh. I think before the questions from the audience really comes to you, I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you. One is, of course, the strategy bit, I think, which you kind of took us through. Yeah. So the other question is, today most retail brands are either shut or operating in a very small way, right? Grocery stores.
Right.
Then how do you think Perpule's offering can really help them post lockdown lifting? Are you making any changes to your offering?
Got it. So another thing that we're doing is while we started a consumer service ourselves, if you open up more retail.in, right? So that is still a pre-beta version of the website, but we started enabling e-commerce for our merchants too. More was never someone who used to deliver before this.
Correct.
Right? Shop.bigbazaar.com, that's another initiative that we are helping drive. So most of these initiatives were never actually meant for Indian. More was never like a big fan of delivery itself because it was not, that useful and it was going to give them a lot of losses. But all of them have actually started changing their strategies. We are helping. So if you look at online delivery, now Spencer's is doing like a very, very big deal. While we aren't powering them, we can see that they are helping a lot of things, and we are already approaching them to see how we can help them. The best bet for e-commerce is if you have like an integrated software that allows you to have real-time inventory availability that's also available on e-commerce on website, because a good number of e-commerce orders will go through only if the fill rate is high. If fill rate is very bad, when I say fill rate, it's what percentage of items that you ordered you're actually getting. People won't deliver, and that would also mean that some of these items might be returned back because of wrong items, etc. That will only add additional cost to your whole e-commerce game. So you need to have infrastructure that allows you to have like a real-time sync between what is happening online and what is happening offline. And that is one of our key offerings from Perpule anyways. So that way we've been trying to push the e-commerce part and the omnichannel part for every retailer quite a lot. More is already building on our stack. BigBazaar was already previously on our stack. Now a good number of larger retailers also want to do this, including the likes of Metro. So hopefully we can help support them. So we have a B2B angle that's helping support them to build their own e-commerce arm and delivery.
Super. Sounds good. I mean, sounds really exciting. Just one more question that I think you kind of answered my fourth question also in that this thing. So just one last question. I think one of the key things that's going to come, especially for offline retailers, right, is the safety aspect. Yeah. Once these stores open up, the customers are going to come back to stores. Right. And safety and social distancing aspect is going to come through. So is your Ultra POS or the product that you have actually can it help in this space, in this?
Sure. So a couple of things. Actually, Starbucks is one of our clients. So they use our point of sale. And one of the features that has now gone into Starbucks, and I think a few other startups have also done this, is they show you the temperature of the person who cooked for you or who made your drink, right? They actually show even the temperature of that stuff, right? So people have understood that a good number of these things are important. All the retailers I can see have started sanitizing much more frequently. Some of these retailers are trying to see if all these vegetables can actually be washed just before delivery also. It's a bit more difficult to achieve, but at a high level, at least within the day, they're ensuring that 3-4 times everything is sanitized and people are actually getting as safe a thing as possible. Again, for big retailers, this is fairly easy. While it is tough, they can still afford to do it. For smaller retailers, it might be very difficult. But as much as possible, what we are trying to do is at least automate most of these things so that mistakes are not made, because you would want to know whether all items are packed, whether all items are sanitized. So, for example, BigBazaar actually wants to have something called sanitized as a state for their whole order deliveries, right? So that's another thing that they are trying to see if they can incorporate. But I think cost is not working out very well to do it not in bulk and individually. So that they're still trying to figure out. But what I can see is hygiene and safety as well as sanitizing of all these items, even consumables, is going to be a big thing in the future. Something that a lot of these people are going to work on. That's frankly another opportunity for startups to actually work on and help out these companies too.
Right. And I think for you all also, since you're a POS which doesn't have actual contact with the cashier, right, you know, the distancing also, I think, kind of helps you all.
Yeah. So in the before lockdown, right, an interesting thing happened. Vishal Megamart was never open for self-checkout. So self-checkout is basically where you can walk into your store, you can scan the items on your own, and you can walk out without having contact with anyone else in the store, right? So this is something that we had for quite some time. It didn't take off very well with a lot of brands. It took off well with a few brands, but then it died down. The primary problem over there was theft. But just before lockdown, for 1 week, we had self-checkout running in almost all our brands. All our brands were fine with self-checkout because they were like contactless, and staying away from staff is something very important. So every brand actually enabled self-checkout. So hopefully that is another thing that people might be comfortable with in the future.
Thanks so much, Saketh. Thanks so much. And I think I'll leave the floor open to the rest of the audience to, you know, get their questions in. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think what we can do at this point, if Imtiaz, if you're still in the session, you can look at the chat and unmute people who have posted questions. Imtiaz, are you on the call?
Rahul, why don't you sort of read out these questions? I'm sure you have them.
I will do that. Yeah, I will do that. So let me start with the first question first. So Saketh, a very interesting question that I see is, you know, would there be more startups that will mushroom? And this question is from Siddhi, since there are a lot of layoffs. And also maybe a related question from Chandan is, you know, what are the So what are some tips for new startups? What are some opportunities post the lockdown? I think some of it you have highlighted. Maybe you can just readdress that.
Sure. So yeah, so I've had like conversations with a good number of VC MDs and founders in the last few weeks to try and understand how they are actually going about the whole thing. So everyone, to be frank, has shifted strategy to try and support their current startups, because most of them feel there isn't that much into getting more startups in than supporting your current startups, because they are in quite a lot of need right now. So personally, I think that might take a hit. But a couple of them also did mention that they are very, very open to actually fund new startups that are driven primarily by behavioral changes that Corona affected, right? So if it is something that is like, so if it is something that's going to grow really fast because of these behavioral changes, I think VCs are still open to funding. But the general notion looks like that funding, like I said, at least for the next 6 months to 1 year, will dry down. And a good number of VC funds that actually have committed, quite big numbers from their partners already think that they might not be able to receive all that funds. So I'm thinking it would be a little lesser. But for good startups that actually show good numbers, which primarily will be, I think, behavioral driven startups from COVID changes, those will continue to get some good funding. But it is going to become a tougher ship, I think, at least for the next 6 to 9 months. With respect to new startups which can come up after this lockdown, so the industries that I told, the 6 industries that I personally spoke about, so I think all of these are probably going to grow really well. A good number of startups which are in this region are already utilizing Corona to try and see how they can actually double down and improve that much faster. I think there is still like scope. Like I told you, for hygiene, I gave a few examples, like the contactless doors and a few other things. Even tech startup, there are a lot of examples that you can actually bring in both remote working and efficiency spaces, and maybe something in the China opportunity that can grow. So I think people will be very, very wary of money burn startups right now. So funding for those will surely reduce if you're trying to build a new startup. Maybe we should follow principles like what Manu Jain says of Xiaomi. If you look at his previous startup was Jabong, it was burning money like crazy, and which was when Myntra actually bought it. But post that, anything he's built, anything he's worked on, primarily that has been operationally profitable from the start. So you, as a new startup, not every startup can be operationally profitable from the start, but ensuring that you have a good capital flow and you have like fairly good revenue that will keep growing and not keep making you burn. So B2B startups that way are much better than consumer startups, because B2B startups are usually very low burn. And because of these behavioral changes, I'm sure a lot of companies will be looking at a few things to try and do. That might be some space for B2B startups or B2B2C startups. That's personally why I like business-to-business startups, because burn is usually lower. But yeah, you will have to figure out ways where you can survive or bootstrap your companies for quite some time before you raise funding, which would mean that you need to have low burn startups.
Great. So in the same space, is there an opportunity for how do the Kirana providers, Kirana stores play into this space? I mean, is there an opportunity for them, and how so?
Right. So 2 things. One is the Dunzo model, right? Wherein Dunzo actually provides the delivery boys, and the small kiranas, etc., can actually deliver to the nearby stores. If you look at many of our apartments that we ourselves onboarded, right, what we realized was many of these apartments had like either a store within their space or some store just nearby that has a WhatsApp channel, and everyone is ordering on that WhatsApp channel and trying to get it in bulk, right? So a good number of these kirana smaller stores are actually being able to crack this to actually move forward. So what we have done is we are now partnering with MyGate to first start off with apartment complexes. So we already have like a banner on the MyGate app now that says that points you to the nearest store that is powered by StoreSim. And when you click there, you can actually order from there. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to see if we can build a stack that any small kirana or retailer can also use. Something that is mobile first. If you look at OK Credit or the likes or Katabook, you can see that most mobile, so Khata book wouldn't have been possible at all if not for the internet penetration that Jio did, right? And it also proved that if you have a very, very simple product, you can actually reach like very, very large masses very, very fast, right? It's like been a crazy success story. I could never think that SME owners could actually, run an app, something like Khata book on their mobile, and it can grow that fast. So that proved that if you have like a very, very good value proposition and some simple user interface, these small users can actually also use apps. So including Khata book and the likes, I think they are also starting something like this. We heard even Bharat Pay has started something like this. We are also starting something like this. We are trying to see if we can give a very, very intuitive and very useful interface for a small kirana guy to actually run a store, something like an e-com store. And that we are trying to help with distribution by partnering with people like PhonePe, Paytm, MyGate, etc. So idea is you open MyGate, it'll automatically, when you click on store, say, it point you to the nearest stores or give you options. You can even get it from the nearby grocery store that you're very comfortable ordering from.
Okay, great. So now the part of the supply chain, of course, is the packaging, right? So how does, and especially when there is this aspect of touching goods and things like that, what do you think is the role for new startups or the packaging industry in general post the lockdown?
So I think the packaging industry has some good opportunities. How it's going to evolve, I still don't know personally. What I've seen are the primary changes is that, people are ensuring packaging is sanitized, ensuring that, packaging space, etc., is like beautifully maintained. The packaging itself has not per se changed. So I'm not very sure how that's going to change, but everything other than that, which is around sanitizing items before and after delivery, and also continuing to sanitize items on a daily basis or an hourly basis. So this is something that is surely going to change. On the retailer's angle, a consumer angle, like I told you about one startup which is trying to see something like sanitizing or washing vegetables automatically before consuming them. So that's there. Specifically with respect to packaging, frankly, I can't think of too much of a change. Something really novel probably will come out that will ensure that can remove the redundancies of all these sanitization. Maybe something like that is possible, but I don't know, because one of the things I had also read about was having brass handles that actually helps with better safety of not having viruses actually stay on surfaces for long. Maybe for packaging, some sort of chemical thing like that might be helpful. I'm not very sure. Let's see. But I'm sure there will be a lot of opportunity to do some new things in that area. Personally, don't have much information to be able to help.
Right. Okay, so again, on the topic of how the supply chains are going to evolve, so we have, of course, these two concepts in supply chain management. One is you have an agile supply chain which can react to changes and modify itself, or has the ability to get modified. And then there is the rigid ones which are optimized. So one of the changes people are talking about, and I think there is a question related to that, is that are the supply chains, you think, going to go very short, in the sense that you produce locally, buy locally, sell locally? Is that something that is very likely to happen? And maybe my personal addition to that question is, what would be this sort of the drivers for it, cost drivers for those? I mean, is there some real business driver that you are aware of for that?
Right. Got it. So I think a good number of people might have heard of Ninja Cart. We are actually partnering with Ninja Cart also to deliver to apartments. That's primarily on grocery. And to our surprise, Ninja Cart has a 60% gross margin. That's something that we never actually thought can happen for grocery, but they still actually have it, right? And the only reason Ninja Cart works and is able to handle these things is if there is some sort of a group buy concept, right? People buying in bulk, that will obviously optimize logistic costs quite a lot, because that's primarily the difference between unit economics of an e-commerce being profitable or not. It's the logistics cost. So logistic cost can be improved only primarily by two things. One is if delivery distance reduces, that is the way you said, if your nearby Kirana store is actually delivering to you. That's one bet that we personally are also making. The second one is group buy. So group buy concept is something that we believe will work in tier 2, tier 3, which is why we are trying to see if we can start off over there first. So both of these concepts are personally my bets also in the future. So hopefully ensuring that nearby Kirana stores can actually deliver to their home in a seamless manner. That should help with logistics and make sure that delivery is still something that's going to grow like crazy. And consumer behavior too. I think I've seen like so many people who never actually ordered grocery online come up as new users for e-commerce. So that's been like a massive adoption rate for e-commerce and online grocery. Now, whether I don't think the likes of BigBasket, etc., will be able to solve this demand, primarily because they're very, very asset heavy, like I said. So it should primarily be solved by someone like StoreSay or someone else, where they can empower these people who are nearby to actually do the last mile delivery. And this is a more asset light model, something that BigBasket as well as GrowFirst tried in the beginning, but couldn't actually do it. But I think Corona is what might actually change that behavior and hopefully drive some of these guys to see that e-commerce and delivery, contactless delivery is something that is important. Yeah, so I personally think that is the way to go, both group buy as well as nearby store delivering to your homes.
Okay, so I think then there are some broader questions relating to, of course, what is the opportunity for the rural parts of India, for as in rural India, what are the opportunities for startups? And then, the related questions are, of course, there are a couple of other questions related to, is this a good time to do a startup, come up with new ideas? I think you addressed some of that, and related to that question is, how do you start with a positive ROI? Is that a must, or you can invest a little bit? Are VCs going to allow you to invest and then become positive at a later point? Is that sort of the atmosphere, or it's pretty much like you need to be cash positive or profitable from the first month onwards?
No, I don't think you need to be cash positive from the first one. That's just not possible. I know very, very few startups who can actually do that, or who've done that in the past. But what it's going to ensure is that startups and founders are more responsible. So a good number of startup founders who are coming up now are founders who either already started up or they've actually gone through one cycle of a startup starting and maturing, IPOing and coming back. So a large number of founders who are coming back to startup is actually going to mature the startup market over here. So consumer companies are still going to be a bit difficult to drive because they are very, very marketing heavy. If one example of a startup that wasn't marketing heavy to actually grow was probably Dunzo, right? Word of mouth was literally their biggest driver of users, and retention was madness. Like it was among the highest retention cohorts I could see ever. Kabir is a close friend of mine, and the primary problem with them was, it was, to be frank, logistic costs. Right, you can't really survive at 50 or 75 rupee logistic costs when you're doing just one delivery, right? So that is something right now they don't have a problem with because of no traffic, but in the future they will need to figure out. But yeah, I think one needs to be more wary about the burn that it's gonna cost. What is more important right now is to prove a concept and grow slowly, even if it means if it means slow growth, still make it slow growth, but don't burn as much in marketing, etc., to prove the concept. Scaling up really fast when you have like a high burn marketing cost or CAC would be like very difficult to sustain. And if you have to sustain it for six to 9 months before getting funding, that might be very difficult. But ideally, proving a concept and trying to see if there is a space that is going to grow without too much spend on marketing costs will be something that is good. Hopefully VC firms aren't as affected as what they told me, because the way they told me, it looked like they're only going to fund older startups who are already part of their portfolio and continue to help them survive, because that is where most of their bets have been until now. But I'm sure there'll be a good number of VCs who will still be open to new opportunities, but no way will they be open to put money in high burn companies, because they just don't have, the economy just isn't supporting that for them. Neither are their LPs. So that would be fairly difficult.
Okay. So then there are a couple of questions which are maybe a little broader in terms of one is China. We get to hear a lot about China trying to invest and take up stake in companies worldwide. So is this something that Indian startups should avoid? Because we do know that there are investments in several Indian startups, and you can choose not to answer this question if you don't wish to. So
I think the recent news was about the HDFC stake of more than 1% by a Chinese investor. So that, yes, I think it rang quite a few alarm bells. I think I got a notice from the government that said that if you are going to take funding from a Chinese VC or from China, you actually need to go through a set of rules and you need approval. So that happened immediately after the HDFC thing became news, right? So I think already the government has reacted to that, and they put in some additional rules to ensure that it's not a fairly straightforward process. And other than that, in general, also VCs have been fairly skeptical about funding alongside Chinese investors. So in fact, a couple of our investors themselves also personally don't like to invest alongside Chinese VCs. That's only going to become bigger now, is what I feel. But again, not sure in the future how it's going to be, but as of right now, yeah, people are quite skeptical.
Okay. And what is sort of the take that VCs, this is a question from Professor Shankar, what would be the take VCs would have going forward in terms of de-risking strategies? Because the market is so sort of, everything is so volatile. And how will they manage their risks? I mean, I'm sure quite a few have, obviously none of us saw this coming. So what would be their way of de-risking in the future?
You're talking about VCs?
VCs, yes.
Okay. So from what I saw, I think the way companies are cutting down on, a few initiatives that are long drawn, instead putting more money into shorter initiatives that can help with cost reduction. That's a similar way that VCs are also looking at. I think a good number of companies in their portfolio that haven't been doing well, they might dry out of funding. That could happen, right? And some companies that are, so in our portfolio, for example, the prime portfolio, there are around 3-4 companies that are affected in a good manner very well. So they've actually accelerated funding for these guys, and they're supporting quite a lot. One of them is MFine, another is ours. There are a couple of other companies that are actually getting a lot of help from Corona per se. So all these companies are actually getting supported much more by these companies. So they are doubling down on that. Some of the older companies, they're continuing to support, try and see if they can help with reduction of costs. So even small things like cloud costs, for example, they're helping with. So AWS themselves are helping out prime portfolio companies by giving them free credit of cloud infrastructure for 6 months, right? A lot of other companies are also doing it along with prime. So that way they're helping us with the cost reductions. One other opportunity that we could actually see is they're trying to see if some talent can be circulated within their startups. So some of these startups that got very, very badly affected, for example, Bounce, etc., right? So they're so badly affected that they had to cut down costs like crazy, had to let go of a lot of people to increase their revenue, etc. But the people who are really good in Bounce, they actually saw that they could get jobs within those companies that are doing well during this time. So they were able to reshuffle that talent a bit, get a few new guys and good guys to our company too. So that has helped quite a lot. So at least jobs wise, people are trying to see, making sure that the best talent stays within their ecosystem and is helping out companies that are in need right now. So for hiring, this has actually been good for us. We got a few very, very good referrals via this that I don't think without Corona, we would have actually gotten people like that referred to. Now there is, I think, because of this, a good number of companies had over-evaluated and overpaid staff quite a lot, I think, in the past. This might be that time to actually bring all of these cost salaries and a few other things to the right market standards, because a few, especially engineering, to be frank, is like fairly overpaid, and those costs, I think, are going to come down, and that they're going to get normalized with other verticals also a bit. That again should help with cost reduction in general across the board. And every VC has actually been sending out decks and helping conduct regular, conversations between founders to see that each other's, learnings are actually applied across. So that's another very good thing that VCs are helping us with. And a good number of them went through. So prime portfolio founders actually went through the World Trade Center crisis. They've actually told us what learnings they got from there and tried to see if wherever we can help, they can help us. They've been very operational, to be frank, with us. While it was just board meetings before, they become more hands-on and more operational and are actually trying to guide us during this time. And makes sense also because most of their money is in startups that they've already put money in. So yeah, at least they become more operational. So that should hopefully help us survive during this time.
Great. So I think we are exactly at 8:01 and we have crossed the hour. And also, I think we have taken most of the questions. I hope I have not skipped any important ones. So Saketh, once again, thanks for this wonderful session. I will hand it over to Captain Nagaraj for closing.
Thanks, Rahul.
Thank you very much, Saketh, for your talk, which was truly amazing and enlightening. And I sincerely believe you have inspired many of our students to take to entrepreneurship, the difficulties and all notwithstanding. We must congratulate you on the community service that you and Perpule are contributing to. And importantly, for drawing us to the fact that there might be opportunities in the whole China scenario post COVID-19. So, so from Dayanand Sagar University, we wish you and Perpule all success, Saketh, and thank you very much indeed for coming here and talking to our students and my fellow colleagues from Dayanand Sagar. So this is I just want to tell everybody here that we have some amazing webinars coming up on Thursday, April 23rd. We have Dr. Joseph Raskina, who will take us through career opportunities in this difficult time. Dr. Raskina has a PhD in economics, developmental economics from the St. Andrews University in Ireland. On Sunday, April 21st, we have General George of the Indian Army, who will talk us through dealing with a VUCA world and what the Army taught him. For those of you who are uninitiated, VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That should be a very interesting talk. Both are amazing people. In signing off, I would like to thank all our participants and see you later. Stay safe and healthy. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
Saketh, thanks so much, man.